What's up, YouTube, and welcome to my pickups video for the month of February 2023. Obviously it was a short month, but it was a pretty good month for pickups, and most of these things I got was part of a very short trip that I took over a weekend mid-month to visit the Denver area to go to a concert. And I've been to Denver a few times, and what my big takeaway is, that market is very, very rich for retro game stores and also inventory. It's honestly shocking to me to see how much stuff is available in those stores compared to what I have locally or in many of the other cities I visit. So if you live near the Denver area or if you're planning to visit, it's a great place to go game hunting, is what I would stress. One thing I did differently this time is I got to visit Boulder, Colorado, which I had never been to. It's not that far away from Denver, I just hadn't really been that direction on all my prior trips. And I got to visit a great piece of the local chain, Game Force, that is located there. And that location had been in business since 1995. So they had a lot of great memorabilia from that era, original like PS1 and N64 standees and signage and things like that. And also just a fantastic inventory. So you're going to see some of the things I got from that store in particular here. Game Force is interesting to me because we actually had them in St. Louis in the 90s, and I believe they were all franchised owned at the time. All the local franchisees packed up and went out of business probably 20 plus years ago, but somehow in the Denver area they are still alive and well. I don't even think the parent company is still alive, but the franchisees have kept it alive, or they've kept the branding just because of it. So kind of interesting to see their signs because they look familiar to me, but also just that the stores there have lasted a much longer time. So with no further ado, let's take a look at what I got this month. I did get two new releases, and these both came in the mail. They were both limited print pre-order stuff that I'd ordered a long time ago. First one of these is the Contra Anniversary Collection from Limited Run. This is an okay collection. I like these Konami packs that they've put together. I really like the Castlevania one because I'm a bigger fan of Castlevania than Contra. This one's okay to me. Again, I think a lot of these games are just nails hard, and if you don't have the patience for them, it's difficult to go back to them. But I don't have a ton of history with the Contra series. One of my friends had Super C when we were growing up for NES, and I played that one probably more than the other ones, but I didn't own any of the Contra games back in the day. I have all these, I think, on cartridge now, including the Game Boy and Super Nintendo and Genesis versions and all that. But these packs are nice just to be lazy and just pop in a quick way to play multiple of the games. There is obviously trophy support and things like that they've added to kind of spice them up a little bit, but I haven't played enough of them to earn it yet, so maybe I'll put some more time into it, but it's a decent pack. This one took a particularly long time. I think I ordered this like early summer last year or something like that. I don't remember for sure, but it seemed like it was longer than usual for limited runs, so happy it finally made it out there. The other one I got came from Europe, and this was from Strictly Limited Games. This is one I was more excited about, and this is the Cannon Dancer or Osman arcade game that has been brought home. This is a really neat, obscure arcade game from 1996 by the developer Mitchell, and the actual team that put this game together was the team that put together Strider for Capcom. So this is kind of like a spiritual sequel to Strider. It has a lot of similar gameplay mechanics and anti-gravity type grappling techniques and things like that Strider is known for. Really flashy game, I guess I would say, as far as some of the things they tried. It's very bizarre, like some of the storytelling in it and some of the level designs are just a little off. So I can see why this game didn't really have widespread sales back in the day. It was a very obscure arcade game in multiple markets. But it is interesting, and it's cool that we finally got a home version of this. It's not perfect. It's got some pretty tinny sound that I guess was just ripped straight off the board, maybe due to the mono sound of the arcade game, but they could have probably made that sound a little bit better. The additional options are okay. It's just kind of tweaks like rewind and fast forward that are pretty standard, but happy this came out regardless. I do think that this might get a domestic version from In Games. It's kind of the US publishing arm of Strictly Limited, so we might see that in the future if you're interested in getting that version. But overall, I'm happy to get it. The arcade board goes for like $900 or something like that, so it's a much cheaper way to play the game than definitely chasing that down or trying to find it in the arcade. Probably the thing that's most interesting to me is that Cannon Dancer is the Japanese title of the game, and Osman is the US title of the game, which seems backwards to me. It's Osman doesn't really have a very appealing marquee, that somebody would just pick up and play in the United States, but Cannon Dancer probably would have been a perfectly fine title to keep. So just thought that was interesting, and they kept the name of both games on the cover art there too. Another cool thing I got from the Denver trip was I'd like to get Turbo Grafx-16 games I don't have, If I can ever find them in the outer cardboard box, that's very unusual, so I'm always happy to add those as well. And I got a copy of Time Ball. This game has very cool artwork on the cover, but don't let it deceive you, it's not very fun. I knew that going in, and it's one of the reasons I've been putting off buying this game for a while. But the fact that it did come with the outer cardboard box with the jewel case inside and everything, I figured, well, I might as well go ahead and get it. So you can kind of see the screenshots on here. It's just a action puzzle game, and it's very in line with games like Junction on the Genesis and Pipe Dream on the NES. They're all like basically the exact same concept, just with a few small tweaks. And I don't really know why those companies weren't suing each other for basically putting out the same game. But the idea is that you manipulate a bunch of pieces on the board to guide a ball or marble or whatever from one point to the other without it falling off the track. It's very tedious, it's annoying, I like puzzle games, and it's just not really my style, so I probably won't be playing this much more, but I did give it a fair shake, and ultimately I agree with pretty much the general internet consensus is that this game is not very good, so let yourself be warned, but it does have cool artwork, so at least it's got that going for it. A couple other things I got on the Denver trip was some upgrades to complete copies for the NES. First one of these was one I was actively looking for because I'm trying to complete the subset of all the Marvel games for NES complete in the box, and this was very high on my want list. I got a very crispy mint copy of The Punisher for NES while I was in one of the stores in Denver, and it was pretty interesting. A customer walked in with a stack of these mint complete in the box games. I guess they were his childhood copies that he'd just been sitting on, and he traded in the whole stack. The store was going back and forth with him negotiating. I'm sitting there watching the stack, and I'm like, he's got a Punisher in there. I really want that. So I was waiting with my friend that they completed the transaction so that I could buy this, and ultimately it worked out in my favor. The other interesting thing that he traded in with that lot was a sealed copy of Spider-Man for the NES, and I didn't even want to ask the price on that because I knew that one was going to be way up there. But I did have to pay up even for this one a little bit, but I figured it was worth it. I had a spare cart that I could sell, so I made back a little bit of the money. But it's very nice to have a very crispy, complete copy of this. I wish everybody kept the same condition of their games, because the other stuff he had, unfortunately the titles weren't all that interesting, but man, the condition was aces. So for anyone else that happened to stumble in that store probably soon after I was there, they got some nice stuff if they were collecting for NES too. So very happy to get that one off my list. The other one I got was at the Boulder store, and this is where I was buying a bunch of manuals for NES, which you're going to see shortly. This was a game that I needed the manual for it, and ultimately they had a complete in-box copy, and it wasn't much more expensive than just buying the manual, so I decided to go ahead and upgrade my copy of Harlem Globetrotters to a complete in-box copy so I could get the manual. Obviously not something I'm going to play. It's not really a favorite genre of mine. I'm not a big basketball fan. But this game was a little bit obscure, it seemed like, for a basketball game. You don't see this one too often. And then it does actually support the 4-player adapter, which there aren't a whole lot of NES games that do that. So kind of some extra bonus points for that. But ultimately, now I have another box in my collection just because I was chasing the manual, and it helped me kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I did get a controller at a different Game Force location while I was out there, and this is something I had never seen before except for in magazine ads back in the day. This is the Triton Game Master for NES, and I think that this is pretty darn rare for the NES because it was a pretty late release, like maybe 92 era, and they also put out a similar controller for the Genesis with just a different color shell. The Genesis controller, you can find them on eBay. It seems like there's several of those listed, but the NES one, I couldn't even find any sales history for this at all. And really the only thing on the internet was the photocopies of the original magazine ads that this was included in. So again, I don't think there's a whole lot of these out there. I thought the color scheme on the controller was extra rad, and so that was definitely a selling point for me as well. I have a lot of these junk controllers for NES, and this one was a little bit more interesting than the average one, but probably not something I'm going to use too often. So neat to get that. This is one of the pleasures of game hunting in stores in person, is that all the impulse stuff that you buy that you weren't even necessarily looking for or didn't even know existed. So definitely a cool thing I found out at the Game Force stores. So let's talk about manuals. Again, that was a big part of my trip. Obviously, one of the main things I hunt when I go to cons or game stores. And the thing I really liked about the majority of the Denver stores is that they were more than happy to sell loose manuals. Whereas sometimes I get blowback from game stores like, oh no, we never sell those separate. Those are if we ever complete the game. We're going to keep those. But the stores there, like, they had them out, they had them organized, they had them priced. One of the stores in the Boulder store had like thousands of NES manuals for me to go through. It was amazing the inventory they had. So I chopped quite a few off my list this month. It was definitely a good month for getting NES manuals. So first one of these I got is Predator, kind of an uncommon Activision release, and it does have this vertical style manual, which is kind of different. I think some of the other Activision titles are like that as well. This is one of the earlier ones. This is Ninja Kid by Bandai. Don't see that one too often either. This was a pretty rare one. I was excited to find this one. This is Times of Lore. Pretty late release RPG for the system by Toho, which was a company that only published a few games. And it had the original map, and it's very beautiful. It has a lot of cool hand-drawn artwork on it. I'm not going to fold the whole thing out, but neat that that was included in the package too. So very happy to get that one. Another game you don't see too often is Touchdown Fever by SNK. You know, a lot of the football games on NES sold really well. This one did not, so probably one of the more uncommon ones for sure. This one I was surprised I needed. It's not a very rare one. This is Archon. This is another Activision title that actually did sell pretty good. This is one I know I've passed multiple times because I've had the box for this for a while, and I thought I had it complete, but I didn't. And that is Trog. This is actually one of my favorites on the NES. It's like a Pac-Man clone. And I've had a box copy, but I just didn't have the manual, so now that one is complete. This next one's a pretty rare one, too. This one, I don't think I've ever seen the manual for sale separate, so I was happy to get this one. This is Widget, which was one of the very few Atlas published games on the NES. I think they put out 4 games on the system, so very happy to get that. Not a great game, but definitely has some cool artwork on it. I got a couple Tengen manuals, which are neat because they have this large format. First one of these was for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And then the other one I got, which is one of the games that they did a Sega port of, which is Alien Syndrome. It's got some pretty cool artwork on that. Keep that artwork in mind. You're going to see it again here shortly. The other thing for NES I got is 2 of the pack-in instruction quick reference guides, which I kind of forgot these existed. So this one's for Tecmo Super Bowl, and obviously this is a supplement to the manual, which I didn't think I had. And then the other one is also by Tecmo. It's Tecmo NBA Basketball. Same kind of thing, just some quick reference guide. The other thing I got at one of those stores, and I thought this was super cool, I'd never seen this before sold separate. This is, I'm going to try to fold this out for you. This is the Ogre Battle Bestiary poster that came with the Super Nintendo release. And I was like, ooh, cool, now I've got the poster, I just got to track down a manual and box, which I also don't have. But then it turns out there's another poster that came with the game, so I think the other one is more of like a map. So yeah, very difficult game to complete if you want it complete because it has 2 posters plus a manual plus a box. That'll be in the long-term plan. Got some original Game Boy manuals as well. First one of these is for Harvest Moon. This one is actually a pretty difficult game to find the black and white version of the manual. The color version of this game sold a ton more copies and it is different, so neat to find that. We also have Cat Trap, which is a interesting puzzle game that has been picking up in popularity lately. And then we have Boxel 2, which is probably one of the more uncommon games for the earlier Game Boy releases. The first Boxel sold really well, but not a whole lot of people bought this one. Then we have a couple Game Gear manuals. So the first one of these is one of my favorites on the system. This was actually developed by the developer of, or designer of the original Bubble Bobble, and that is Popples for the Game Gear. I would love to have the box for this game. It's very difficult to find. In the US version especially, but this is the US version of the manual and also very difficult to find. Unfortunately it's black and white, but very cool artwork on it, and I really like this game too. The other one I got, which is also a very cool Game Gear release, is Tempo Junior. All 3 of the Tempo games are pretty uncommon, but this one you don't see too often, and it's kind of interesting because it was part of the Kids Gear, or I'm sorry, the Sega Club, which was designed for younger players, but really the Tempo series wasn't in Japan. But definitely a cool game and neat to have the manual for that as well. Love to find a box for that someday too. The other cool thing I got at one of those stores was a Funko Land catalog, and this isn't one of the ones they would give away in the stores. This is one that they would mail to people, and it was from 1995, so it's actually pretty early, so you can see like all the price lists and stuff like that in here. But when Funko was primarily a mail order company, this is what they would send out to their mailing list, and I think it's pretty neat to find these whenever I can. So happy to get that. It even had some notes from some of the games that they were circling and wanting to buy and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of know that feeling, and it's pretty neat to see that in retrospect. The last thing I got at one of those stores out there is a EGM magazine, and this one is kind of deceptive. I've been following an online checklist, and I think this is the correct answer on that. But this is EGM's spin-off magazine Top Score, but it's actually the second issue of Top Score, and I think it took the place of a regular EGM magazine, and technically this is EGM magazine number 7. Maybe there is a number 7 out there, but nobody seems to have any photographic proof that it exists, and I don't see anything in this that shows that it was intended to be number 7, but it seems like there was an issue 6, and there was an issue 8, and then this came in between as far as release date. So I think the idea was to get more people into their Tips and Tricks magazine, and so they put this out in place of the EGM, but then this died. They never made another issue after this that I'm aware of. I think it's just the 2 issues. So kind of neat to see this, and then, like I said before, this one has Alien Syndrome on the cover, so you get to see that cover art that you just saw on the NES manual on this magazine, too. But very happy to find this, too. I like getting these early EGMs, especially one that's below issue number 10. There's not a whole lot of these, because most of these were like NES-based games that they were talking about at the point. So anyway, like I said, the bulk of the stuff came from the trip. I was very happy to go out there. Hopefully I can spend some more time in the Denver area, maybe even hit some more rural areas of Colorado that might also have games. But definitely feels very rich compared to what I'm accustomed to finding in my travels. So very happy to find all that stuff. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think. And I will talk to you soon. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.